How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and it is good to be back at the moon base after our journeys over the past couple of weeks with us having a guest last week and then technical difficulties a couple weeks ago. It's good to be back, and in a weird way, Christian, it's even kind of nice to see you. How you holding up, man? How you been?
Well, I'm finally back. So nice of you to let me on your little show again. I can see you've been hard at work at doing absolutely nothing of note. As for me, I've been out bettering myself. I finalized several arms deals and have set up a smuggling pipeline to funnel luxury American Coca-Cola into Canada.
Cool. Not what I was expecting, but that's good to hear. Glad you are doing well with your... I think they have Coke in Canada. Okay. All right, man. You know, whatever. I knew a guy that made a living at one point selling Kindles to people in Canada. So yeah, I don't know, man. Canada is a mystery. But we actually have quite a bit to get through today. A lot of news happened this week. I was kind of surprised. I didn't anticipate it being such a loaded week, but we had a Nintendo Direct, we had a Sony State of Play, and then just kind of a bunch of stuff happening around the video game world, drama with the Unity engine, and a whole bunch of stuff. But, you know, as always, we'll kick it off with what I've been playing lately, and I guess kind of the lone big release, unless I'm missing something off the top of my head this past week, was the Crew Motorfest. Although Mortal Kombat 1 did come out in early access, but in terms of like full-blown release, Crew Motorfest came out. I have a video up on the channel of me playing it. They have a 5-hour trial available to those that are interested on pretty much all the platforms, at least I can think of. On PC, it's done either through the Ubisoft client itself or through Epic, or you can just go onto your Xbox, PlayStation, whatever, and download it. So I definitely would suggest checking it out. I think the game is pretty solid. I've never really played any of the previous Crew games. My time playing racing games, I guess, is maybe, you know, wound down a little bit over the years. I grew up playing a lot of them, especially the ones that were in the arcade where you would actually get into a seat and have a steering wheel and all that stuff. I played quite a few on the PC growing up, as my dad had, you know, he invested in a steering wheel and pedal setup. When I was a kid, he would play like the NASCAR game and stuff like that. So I played some of that. I remember when we got the original Need for Speed, back when it was called The Need for Speed. And so, you know, racing games were kind of a larger part of the games that I played growing up. But as I got older, you know, I didn't play as many. I talk about it in the Crew video. It was there was a Gran Turismo on the PlayStation 3 that I ended up getting really into, put hundreds of hours into it. And then after that, it's just kind of been like the more arcade style stuff. You know, I liked, you know, a little bit before that Gran Turismo game, like Need for Speed Underground. I liked quite a bit. I would keep up with Need for Speed here and there. I like the Most Wanted that came out on the Wii U. And then it was like the Forza Horizon games. I really like those. You know, they're kind of a little, you know, I wouldn't quite call them over the top, but they're certainly not necessarily bound by all the laws of gravity and physics and all that fun stuff. They do some you know, play kind of fast and loose with that stuff, you know, but it makes for a really fun game. And I thought the last Horizon game in particular was very, very good. It was one of my favorite games that came out that year. I put a lot of time into it and really, really enjoyed it. And this year, you know, it's kind of like the big marquee racing game is coming out in a few weeks, and that's Forza Motorsport, the traditional Forza game, which is much more like a Gran Turismo. You know, it's like a sim. They've definitely maybe lightened up a little bit on how hard it's going to be to get into, as I think that maybe that was something they realized, that maybe they were kind of losing their own fan base and consumer base to itself by having those Horizon games. So I think they're trying to maybe bring some people back into the fold, and it makes sense, you know, with it being on Game Pass, that's going to help out quite a bit as well. And the Crew Motorfest is really good counter programming to that, because it is more in the lines of that Horizon style. You know, it has real cars in it, but you're in a very nice tropical island areas. They have, it's the game actually takes place in Hawaii, and it's pretty pleasant to look at. It's not gonna knock your socks off in terms of graphics or anything like that, but I thought the wheels were nice and round, the puddles were reflective. I played the PC version. It ran at a very smooth frame rate. Had no issues whatsoever. There's one race I did in the footage that I have up on the channel that really took you all around to kind of see different varieties of terrain and all that stuff that you can get into on Hawaii. They have your traditional asphalt race course type stuff, street racing, point to point, all that. But then there does seem to be some off-roading and some big ramps to get some crazy amounts of air. And of course you have your, nitrous turbo boost and all that stuff. And I think it's really cool. It definitely has that festival motif that Horizon does have. There's a lot of inflatable elements up flying around the sky. I think we saw it was like a ram or something like that, or some type of animal that was all over the place. And there's fireworks and confetti going off and all that. It's nothing that we haven't seen before. I think the Dirt games were doing that for a while, and so it doesn't feel like it's pardon the pun, but I mean, it's not reinventing the wheel. You kind of know what you're getting into with it. And I like it. I like the Hawaiian look to it. I thought that it was cool to have that kind of beachy tropical thing. I like that. And the Mexico setting of Horizon 5 had a lot of that element to it as well, but they really went out there because there was like snow aspects and, mountainous areas, and then you can go all the way down to the beach and all that, get into the jungles. And I don't know if this game, the Crew, is going to be as varied as that, but what I saw, I really enjoyed.
I invented the Hawaiian shirt in my movie True Romance. Fat men everywhere have me to thank.
Thanks for that tidbit, but I'm pretty sure you didn't invent the Hawaiian shirt. I think that's been around for a while. But any racing game is only as good as how well it plays. And from what I played with the Crew Motorfest, I think it plays pretty well. It has your standard mechanics. Like I already said, it has that nitrous boost to it. It has a rewind mechanic in it that we're kind of used to at this point. But I didn't feel like I was fighting with the cars. The one kind of starter car they give you to kind of get around the open world from point A to point B, I chose a muscle car, and it's just, it doesn't handle the best. It's a little boat-like, so that's kind of on me. But the vehicles that you actually get into, we tried out a couple different sports cars. We even tried out a VW bus. Like, all of them felt really well. I didn't feel like I was in an argument with the controls or the gameplay or anything like that. I'd like to see how well more of the off-roading stuff handles. We got to experience only just a little bit of it. And that's kind of the stuff that I am more maybe drawn to, is the off-road racing, just because we don't get a lot of that. Most racing games take place in like a city, like the last however many Need for Speed games are usually traditionally locked to a city. And, stuff like Gran Turismo, Forza Motorsport, all that, it's either like circuit racing, on existing, like well-known real world locations, or, fictional stuff, but it's a lot of that, on pavement type stuff. And it really is only kind of the Horizon series. And I guess, the rally games and all that, they go off-road, but those are much less about exploration and kind of forging your own path. I mean, in rally racing specifically, because your navigator is giving you specific directions about where to go. But with the Crew, I think it's a solid overall package. I don't know if I would run out and pay full price for it. We'll have to see how they support it, the depth of the game, all that stuff. I just kind of took that brief look at it. And, they do have some pretty big competition in Forza coming out soonish, a little bit less than a month away, I believe at this point. I think it's like second week of October. And, like I said, it's on Game Pass. So it's, very readily and easily available. And, we'll check it out when it comes out. But yeah, as it stands for what I played, I would recommend the Crew Motorfest. I think it's a solid title if you're looking for a more arcadey racing game that has real world cars and all that stuff, and nice to look at. I enjoyed it, so I give it the recommend. But other than that, I didn't really play anything else that was new. There was nothing that came out like indie wise that really kind of caught my eye. So I just kind of, been playing, more of what I have been. I guess we'll touch upon NBA 2K24. I talked about it on last week's show where the game is just kind of coming out at a weird time. And I don't necessarily mean because of other releases around it. But, the NBA season doesn't start for like another 5 weeks. I think it was like 6 or 7 weeks from when the game came out. It's somewhere around there. It's like the tail end of October when the season starts. So it's really kind of far in advance, at least to me, for the game to come out. I think they would be better suited with an October release where you start to get basketball on the mind and you're ready to go. So I'm just, I know once the season starts and I'm back into my routine of watching basketball every night, I'll have the game on my mind. It is certainly not out of the ordinary, just like I do with the show, for me to be watching a basketball game on my phone and have NBA up on the TV to play. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting into it. It doesn't stop me. I'm still like, I don't know, I'm getting close to like 20 hours in already. I've just been picking away at it a little bit here and there. Admittedly, I didn't play much in terms of video games this week. I even slowed down quite a bit on Starfield. Just some personal stuff going on. Just didn't have the time to get to it. But NBA, I think what I ended up doing, which is helping quite a bit, is, I pretty much stick to franchise mode, or as they call it now, it's the NBA eras mode, which I got into more depth last week, so I won't rehash all that. But I started, one with the current day New York Knicks, and I was like, all right, I guess that'll be my franchise for this year. But I just kind of got disinterested in it. I was like, you know what, let me just go and do something else. So I fired up instead. I was like, let me start an eras mode from the early 90s. And, see if we can draft Shaq and build a team around him, kind of like they tried to do in real life. And I've actually been having quite a bit of fun with that, playing back, with more of the players that I grew up with. And it's a lot of fun because that game, it does kind of force you to play basketball like they did in the 1990s. There's a lot less emphasis on a 3-point shot, guys driving to the basket a little bit more. Defense is a little bit different. You see more mid-range shots, which are kind of a lost art these days. And it just feels kind of like a different game than what you're used to playing. So I've really, really been enjoying that. I think the presentation is fantastic. Last year's game, I did an eras franchise, but I did in the early 2000s. So I didn't really mess around with anything from the 90s. I think the graphical presentation is pretty good. I think it's not a CRT filter that they have, but it is definitely trying to make it look older than 90s basketball footage actually looked. I mean, it's not hard to find footage of 1990s basketball out there. You can see a million Michael Jordan highlight videos and Shaq and Tim Duncan and David Robinson and Hakeem White. These are, some of the greatest players of all time. There's hours and hours and hours of footage of them out there. And basketball in the 90s, like, yes, broadcast television is certainly not what it is now, but it didn't look this bad. It's a little blurry. It's almost like kind of like they put like Vaseline over the camera lens. You can't turn it off, of course, if you want. But I wish they would go just a little bit farther with the presentation than they do. So when you're playing the game, you can press up on the D-pad and it'll bring up a little like kind of badge in the corner. I guess, I don't know. It's not a lower third because it's an upper third, I guess. I don't know. And it'll have the name of the player that you are currently you currently have selected. And then it'll have not their stats, but it'll have okay, how do I say this? Their stats in terms of like their attributes, not their stats in terms of how many like points they've scored that game. So when you're on offense, they'll say like he's an A+ at 3-point shots and a B- at playmaking and et cetera, and all that stuff. That stays the same. It looks the same whether or not you're playing with current day teams or teams from the 70s. I wish maybe they would mix it up a little bit and make it fit in a little bit more with the other UI that's on the screen. But other than that, that's a minor complaint. The one thing I didn't notice, just because, like I said, I didn't play with the 90s teams in last year's game, is how many real life players are missing. I think for the most part, all basketball fans know that Charles Barkley is not in the NBA game. So obviously, you expect him to not be in there, but there are quite a few other guys, nobody that I can name specifically. But as I was going through the rosters, I would see on like the Timberwolves, like their center, and it's like, oh, you can very easily tell this character is auto-generated. He looks like a created character from 2K, because they would create guys that would have modern day hairstyles that you wouldn't have seen in the 90s, or guys with full sleeve tattoos. There weren't really any dudes with full sleeves in the 90s, So it's player likenesses and rights deals and all that stuff. You take what you can kind of get, but I'm really, really enjoying it, and I'm getting a little bit more into the groove. I'm playing it a little bit more, and it's going to get there. Like I said, once the season starts, then I'll be kind of full on with it. But I think it's a pretty good package this year. I can't imagine I'm going to touch the single player stuff. I thought last year's was pretty disappointing. I know they changed a lot of it this year. They stripped out a lot of the story stuff. I guess I misspoke last week. I saw an article that said that they removed all the story stuff. I guess there is still a loose narrative in this year's game, but I just don't have the desire to go into it. I don't want to spend any money on it. It's just not worth it. For the people that want to spend hundreds of dollars to level up their character, 15 minutes after starting the game for the first time, like, go for it, do your thing. But playing online is just not something I do. I'm happy to play against the computer. I think the AI controlled teams this year are pretty good. I think it's more balanced than last year's game. I think it's a little bit harder than last year's game, and I mean that in a good way, because last year's game just got very, very easy. And I have found myself already, however many hours I am into it, where I think it's time to bump that difficulty up. Because I usually play on the hardest difficulty, and this year I started in the middle because I was like, oh wow, this is actually like kind of a challenge as opposed to last year. But I think it's time for me to kind of start bumping it up. I'm finding myself being up by like 20 points, and I shouldn't really, it should be a little bit more even than that. But I think it's a solid entry. I think that we had a pretty good year for sports games this year in terms of what I like to play. I thought the show was very good this year, although they didn't make very many changes to it. They haven't really made a lot of changes to the show in a while, and I really wish they would maybe start fleshing out franchise mode and add in some of the more fantastical options that you can get with NBA 2K, where you can like turn off salary caps and stuff like that, and really just kind of build how you want to build. And I think that would be a nice addition to the show. But gameplay wise, like actually playing the games, I think the show played great this year, and I think NBA plays great this year. So, with Madden being a total disappointment, I didn't touch EA FC, and I don't think the NHL game is out yet. I am kind of curious about it. And then, I guess the only other big sports games, we did get 2 wrestling games this year when we're usually used to getting 1. And then the EA UFC game is coming out. We talked about that the past couple of weeks. There actually last night, there was kind of some news that broke about it. I guess I'll put it in here real quick. I didn't add the news story, but there was like a straight gameplay footage came out last night. And it looks pretty much identical to last year, or not last year's, but the last game. It was 3 years ago. A lot of the same animations, so that's really disappointing. I can't imagine that this game is probably going to review very well because of that. They talk a big game about changing engines and, putting more realistic violence into the game to the point where it's going from a teen rating to a mature rating. But when you see reused animations that have been used for, this is the 5th iteration of the game, it's like, come on, guys, we gotta do a little bit more. And then also there were some screens that were in the footage where it was like, want to earn more tokens, watch an ad. And it's like, that's straight up mobile game stuff. So that looks awesome. Can't wait for that. So we'll see how that goes. But that'll wrap it up for NBA 2K24. I'll touch upon Starfield a little bit. I've been making my way through it, putting in some time. I've finished the Ryujin Industries faction quest. We did kind of the first half of it on stream, so you can check that out. I think ultimately it's a very disappointing faction quest compared to the Vanguard stuff. I need to go back and finish the Vanguard. I'm like 2 missions away from ending it. I think that stuff is like some of the best stuff in the game so far that I've experienced. And then once that's done, I'll probably move on to that pirate faction thing. But I have been focusing a little bit more on the main story. I kind of just want to, not that I want to rush through it, but I kind of want to get through the main story and just kind of like, I need a little bit of incentive right now for me to keep playing that game. I think I just played so much of it so quickly I got a little bit burned out. So I need kind of some reasons to get back in and playing it. In an underwhelming faction quest is not going to be that. I felt like I was forcing myself to finish that quest line out. I really had to sit there for a couple hours the other day to be like, all right, let's just get through this thing. And we finally did. And it just, I don't know, there wasn't a great reward for finishing it. It kind of ends on a wet note where it's just like, okay, great. Now you work here. There's a mission board, and it's like not any different than the mission boards elsewhere in the game. Maybe a little bit more focused on stealth because that faction storyline is very much stealth focused. But I'm enjoying the main story. It started to pick up. It's funny. In my first video about Starfield, which was the episode from 3 weeks ago or something like that, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I talked about like, oh, when you get to this certain mission in the game, then you kind of know what you're doing for the rest of the game. And I was wrong. Maybe it'll pick back up, but I was wrong. The first several missions are very much fetch quests, but you do start to get variety, and some of them are pretty cool. And I like that. I like that, they have a very similar structure. You kind of know what you're getting into, but then they, not like a big plot twist or anything, nothing like that, but there's a twist to what you are doing. And it's like, okay, well, we're still accomplishing the same objective that we were, but now we're doing it in a different manner and different play style. And it's like, okay, I like that. That's a nice take on things. So I am enjoying it. I think the game is very good. It just has some glaring flaws that I just cannot get past. And it just holds it back in so many ways because of that. But it really is. I know that a lot of the fervor has kind of died down now that the game has been out for a little bit. You have your 50-50 divide there of people that think it's boring, people think that it's a massive step back or just not a good game or whatever it is. And then you have the people that are really, really enjoying it, and they're enjoying it for different reasons. Some people are just all about the shipbuilding. Some people just want to do space piracy, and there are people that are just setting up trucking pipelines on planets and stuff like that. And then there's people like me that are just experiencing the game kind of as intended, I guess, with completing story missions and side quests and all that stuff. I'm not really stopping to mess around with I don't know what you would call them. There's got to be a term for it. Things you can do in the game but are not the objective of the game. Not side quests, because side quests are like an actual tangible thing in the game, but just like playing the game in a way that is not the typical intended use of the game. Which I think is cool. I think it's awesome that you can do that. You can sink 20, 30, 100 hours into this game and do these things that don't have quest markers or NPCs that are assigned to it or anything like that. And you straight up are just role playing and inventing the story in your head. I think it's awesome that it has that sandbox element to it, as well as, a full fleshed out game with stories and characters and all that stuff. So, I'm really digging it. I don't want to give too many things away, to spoil, the rest of the year, but I was having a conversation with friend Davis yesterday. We're talking about Game of the Year plans, and I'm looking at it right now, and man, I think Starfield is in 4th or 3rd place right now on my working list. So it's kind of crazy, it's really, I didn't expect it, I didn't expect it to jump so far after all those initial issues I had, but there's just something about that game, just really something about that game that keeps me coming back to it. So we'll see how it goes. I don't want to make any final decisions, of course, till I finish that main story, but as it stands right now, I'm pretty well enjoying it. The last thing on the list, which I'll just kind of briefly touch upon, so there was an embargo that went up a few days ago. Sony invited out media and influencers and all the like to check out Spider-Man 2 and do some hands-on gameplay and all that. So, Spider-Man 2 is kind of on the brain this week because it's my most anticipated game of the year. The first Spider-Man game from a few years ago is one of my all-time favorite games. I absolutely love it. Played it through to the completion several times since it came out. Just really, really enjoy that game. And seeing what they have in store for Spider-Man 2 is just like, my God, I'm going to lose myself in this game when it comes out. But I just not that long ago played through the game again. But I haven't played Miles Morales since Miles Morales came out. So I started playing some Miles Morales, and man, I had a different TV when I played that game initially, and so playing it now on their 120 hertz mode, which is like ray tracing at 40 frames a second. Man, that game looks so good. And I was thinking to myself the other day when I was playing it, I was like, man, this game looks absolutely incredible, and this was a PS4 game ported to the PS5. What is this other game going to look like? Like, what is Spider-Man 2? I have a feeling it's going to look unbelievably good. I am a little bit partial to the look of Miles Morales simply because the game takes place at Christmas time. Christmas time is it's my favorite holiday, so I have a little bit, there's kind of an attachment there. I like, seeing the city at night with the lights and the Christmas trees in the windows and all that stuff. So, a little bias maybe towards it, but man, that game is just so fun. It's so fast and fluid. The combat it's button mashy, and it sounds like they haven't really changed that too much with Spider-Man 2, but it sounds like you're gonna have some new gadgets and new ways to kind of approach things. I think being able to shoot those web lines out and form your own kind of catwalks in a way to pick people off, I think is going to be a really fun way to play that game if they give you the freedom to really play it that way. We know it's an ability because we've seen it in marketing materials for the game, but we'll see how it actually works in practice once the game comes out. But we're just a little bit less than a month away from that. I am really looking forward to it. Christian, you were kind of hanging out yesterday morning when I was playing it. You have any thoughts?
I can fly through the streets of New York with all the swagger of a middle-aged white man.
Fantastic for you. That's going to wrap up what I played for this week, and we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right, we are back with the news, and we have a ton to get through, so we're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time on each individual story. So I definitely recommend if you want a little bit more information to go and read original articles or seek out video footage or what have you. But we'll get through this together. We'll start off with a Nintendo Direct recap. So I actually ended up live streaming the Direct because the last time they did a Direct, I was like, well, that's not going to have anything interesting, and it was actually a very good Direct, and I wish I would have streamed it or covered it, in some way. And then that happened with the State of Play. The State of Play, they put out the marketing and said, oh, we're not going to be talking about much important today, just some indies and third-party stuff, and then they end up going into detail about a whole bunch of stuff. So I ended up not covering the State of Play, but we're going to get through both. We'll start with Nintendo. So they start off with a Splatoon 3, an expansion for that. They're bringing Mario vs. Donkey Kong from the Game Boy Advance over to the Switch, which, again, I brought this up on the stream when I was talking about this initially. We're very seemingly getting close to the end of the life for the Switch. It sounds like the next system will most likely be out at the end of next year. And Nintendo always does really interesting stuff towards the end of their system's lives. They either do some interesting ports or remasters or just oddball stuff. We're kind of getting that with the Mario RPG stuff, and now this like Mario vs. Donkey Kong thing, and I think the game looks really nice. They showed off Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which is coming out in January. It's kind of the first big game release of next year. That game is getting a lot of press, a lot of hype. We've seen a lot of trailers of it so far, and it continues to look very, very nice. Horizon Chase is getting a sequel with Horizon Chase 2, which is actually out now. It came out that day, I believe. Super Crazy Rhythm Castle. Konami is making this. It is a rhythm game. Let's see. They showed more. I'm not going to talk about every single game in here, but they showed more of Super Mario RPG, which is coming out in November. They're porting a couple of DS games called Trace Memory and its sequel, which never came out in North America, called Another Code R. That's coming out at the beginning of next year. They debuted that Princess Peach game, which is called Princess Peach Showtime. The last Direct, they showed like a brief teaser trailer of it, but they showed a much more fleshed out version here. I think this game is going to do really, really well for them. There are a lot of kids that got exposed to Princess Peach in a big way with that Super Mario Brothers movie, and now she's going to have her own game. Believe me, that game is going to sell pretty solid. Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 remastered coming to Switch. It's actually coming to other stuff as well, but the kind of the first we saw of it was here at the Nintendo Direct. It's coming out on Valentine's Day. They showed more of Detective Pikachu trailer with that. That's coming out in just a few weeks.
I saw that Detective Pikachu thing.
Yeah.
I think I may have a new role to aim for. Check this out. Christian Slater, Pokemon Cop. I go through anime or whatever the hell Pokemon is, and I bust them all for sex crimes.
Fantastic. Enjoy your Pokemon SVU. Trombone Champ, which I honestly thought was a Switch game, but it was actually only on PC. That's out. Let's see here. Oh, new Contra. The Contra thing is weird. So it's Contra Operation Galuga, and it is a reimagining of the original Contra. So it's not a remake. It's not a remaster. It's the original Contra, but different. So figure that one out. My personal favorite game name of this presentation, Unicorn Overlord. It's a kind of looks like Octopath Traveler. It is coming out from Vanillaware and Atlas, I believe, is putting it out. And it is pretty much what you expect it to be. You know, it's an RPG. It's got a pretty nice art style if you like that Vanillaware look about it. They're not really changing up their art in any big way, but it looks pretty nice coming out spring next year. Summer next year is getting Luigi's Mansion 2 in HD. Kind of the big surprise for me was F-Zero 99, which is, an F-Zero Battle Royale. It looks like the Super Nintendo F-Zero games, so the original F-Zero. It's nice to see that they're doing something with the F-Zero license. People have been asking about it for years. I think that kind of the fact that F-Zero fans like to overlook or maybe don't even know about or whatever as to why we don't get new F-Zero games is because the last few F-Zero games sold really, really bad. Like 30,000 copies total. It was really bad. But it's cool. Maybe this would lead to them to do more with F-Zero. Let's see. A couple of League of Legends spin-offs, Bandletale and Song of Nunu. They showed WarioWare Move It, a bunch of micro mini games, all that good stuff. Wargroove is getting a sequel. They're bringing Dave the Diver over from PC onto Switch. I think it's an excellent, excellent Switch game. Comes out in October 26th. The last wave of courses for Mario Kart 8 was announced, coming out this holiday. And then kind of their end of showcase, big deal thing. Again, end of life cycle, big surprise port. Paper Mario with a 1,000-Year Door coming over from the GameCube. So I think if you're a Switch owner, you got a pretty solid end of 2023 and first 6 months of 2024 coming your way. They've got some really interesting stuff on the horizon, and I'm pretty happy with what Nintendo is doing. I don't think I'm going to run out buying Switch, especially if their next system is going to be coming out, in a year or so. I'll be happy to pick that up, and hopefully it has backwards compatibility, and I can play all these great games. Let's move over to the Sony side of things. They showed off Baby Steps, which is kind of like seems kind of like a Bennett Foddy game, I guess would be like the biggest way to describe it. Actually, I heard somebody say that it is a Bennett Foddy. It was not. Oh wait, is it? Baby Steps game. I am seeing different things on Google. Give me just a... Who is making this? It is. Okay, he is involved. Okay, yeah. But that's kind of how they started the showcase, and it was definitely like an odd game to start with, but it was cool. I like the fact that they took a little bit of a different direction with it. They showed Ghostbusters Rise of the Ghost Lord, which is a VR co-op ghost game. So nice to see the VR headset getting some support. And they followed that up with the Resident Evil 4 Remake VR mode, which is coming soon. And they showed off Resident Evil 4 Separate Ways as well. More footage of Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. On the stream that I was watching the Kind of Funny stream of this presentation that night, and they were like, "Is this where they announced that the game is delayed?" But it is not delayed; it's still coming out in the beginning of December. Non-game news: they showed 3 new console covers or plates, I guess is their official term, as well as matching controllers. They are like metallic-ish. It's volcanic red, cobalt blue, and sterling silver. Actually, really, I'm not a big fan of red and black. It's kind of like my least favorite color scheme. But the red system is very striking. It looks really nice. I have an all white entertainment stand, and I still just have the plain white PS5. I always got white consoles. I just like the way that like white electronics look. But I was like, man, if I slap those red ones on there, man, they provide some nice contrast. So I don't know if it'll get me to go out and pick them up, but thought it was kind of nice. Helldivers 2, further gameplay of that, it is getting delayed. Then they showed Marvel Spider-Man 2, big trailer for that. More focused on, switching between characters, how the city works, some gameplay elements and things like that. I am beyond excited and very much looking forward to Spider-Man 2, just counting down the days. DLC expansion for Tales of Arise Beyond the Dawn. Foam Stars is getting an open beta, and then they ended the show with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth coming out on February 29th, 2024. I can't imagine I'll be getting into it because I wasn't able to make it all the way through Final Fantasy VII Remake. I tried my best. It just got so slow after a while that I just could not get through it. But for the people that really love that game, I am super excited for them to experience one of their favorite, or if not their favorite game, in this beautiful remake fashion. For me, I don't have that nostalgic attachment to the game that would allow me to get through some of those slow, grindy parts. But man, it was a visual treat, and there were some really high highs in that 20 or so hours I spent with the game before kind of calling it quits that I really enjoyed. But yeah, 2 big kind of events this week with the Direct and the State of Play. It was pretty nice week. Lots of games to talk about, lots of stuff that people are really excited about. This is not all, obviously a lot of these games not coming out this year. Some of them are coming out this year, and I've said it time and time again on this show. I truly do believe that 2023 is one of the all-time greatest years for video games. I think it'll be looked back upon extremely fondly. I think that there are going to be some games that came out during this year, Zelda, Starfield, Spider-Man, as well as others that are going to stand the test of time. Baldur's Gate 3. There's going to be people that are going to be playing Diablo 4 for years to come. People that are losing their mind over Armored Core and all that stuff. And, also smaller titles that were super inventive like Viewfinder. I think that this year had a lot in it. And not only that, but a lot for a lot of different kinds of video game players. So yeah, it's been really cool to see everything coming together this year. All right, next up, XDefiant, Ubisoft's new first-person shooter featuring the Tom Clancy universe characters, is delayed. It failed quality check at the console level. So they said that they were going to be doing a September release date, but we were halfway through September and hadn't heard anything. They had some closed betas going on. They did a couple of open betas, but there was just no news. And then the news came out just a few days ago that it failed certification. Now, games fail certification all the time. This is nothing new, nothing worrying or anything like that. But what is different is how publicly they addressed it. So on September 11th, their game director, Mark Rubin, announced the failed test in a surprisingly open and transparent blog post. That sentence comes from Zach Zweisen's article on Kotaku. He goes on to say, games aren't just released onto consoles and platforms without any checks. Companies like Sony and Microsoft test every game released for their machines to make sure they function properly and don't break anything. Rubin says, we realized that we had more hard work to compliance than we had anticipated. If it had passed, then we would have been able to ship at the end of August, but it didn't. So we have spent the last 3 to 4 weeks fixing those issues and getting ready to do another submission. If it passes, he says that it could still end up being released in September, but it sounds like it's going to end up being in October, especially if they pass with the kind of asterisk saying, hey, you pass, but you need to have a day one patch. And he says that if they have to go that route, then it would definitely push it into October. So it's kind of interesting that they were that public about it. It's kind of nice, kind of refreshing, to say that, like, hey, we had this problem and we're addressing it. And, I wonder if maybe there's some ulterior motives to it, to say, like, if the game comes out and it's kind of broken, to be like, we did fail, sir. We obviously have some work to do on this game, but hey, we told you we're working on it, and we have, and we continue to do so. So I don't know, maybe they're trying to get out ahead of it if they feel like maybe it is going to be kind of broken. When I played the game earlier this year, which was obviously several months ago at this point, it felt fine. It just felt different because I'm so used to Call of Duty, so it was just a different experience. But you could tell that it was definitely lacking in some areas. There were some minor performance issues. I didn't notice anything, too out of form or anything like that. But it certainly had some, some setbacks, I guess you would say. But I kind of figured they would just hammer that stuff out. I am kind of looking forward to it coming out. I want to check it out. I did enjoy the beta that I was in. But it like I said, it's refreshing for people to be so upfront about this stuff. But I'm also worried that maybe this is all kind of masking other issues with the game, and they're just kind of I'm not saying that they're doing this in like a bad way or anything like that, but maybe trying to take some of the initial hit away from those issues by saying, like, hey, it's an ongoing process. We're going to be patching the game. We're going to be updating the game. Like we told you when it failed, sir. We're updating the game. We're making it better. Maybe it'll come out and be totally fine. Who knows? But we'll for certain check it out when it arrives, either at the end of this month, which is coming up soon. I would say maybe hold out for next month, but at the same time, October is slammed with games. Although no real big first-person shooter, so maybe it gives it a chance to stand on its own before the next Call of Duty comes out in November. Next up, Star Wars Jedi director Stig Asmussen is leaving Respawn. He's been there for a little bit. He was the lead on the two Jedi games that were very well received. I thought, Jedi Survivor this year it's one of my favorite games of the year. It certainly had its fair share of problems. It's been in the news again this week because they did a big patch where on the consoles it's doing really well, but on the PC it's still pretty broken. But he seemed, Steve seemed pretty committed to finishing out this trilogy and really wanted to stay with it, but he has decided to leave. He's not said where he is going. And then in the statement from EA, it says veteran Respawn leaders will be stepping up to guide the team as they continue their work on Survivor. And I assume by the time they are in full blown production mode on the next game, they will have a new, director, lead on the project. He's a talented dude. He kind of cut his teeth on the God of War series before going over to EA and Respawn. And, I was very apprehensive to get into that first game, Fallen Order, because, in the press leading up to it, in the previews, they were really hammering on how much of like a Souls-like game it is. And those are just games that I'm not interested in playing, but I'm glad that I finally did play it. Opened me up to a style of game that I had been closed off from. And then with Jedi Survivor this year, I think they fixed a lot of I wouldn't say problems, but they fixed some quality of life stuff from the first game. I think overall it was it was a bigger game. It was a better game. I will say, my big knock against it is that story. The story in the second game was super, super weak. And they didn't really set anything up big for a third game. Now they're definitely doing a third game. This game is sold way too well. And it seems like it was planned as a trilogy, but whatever they end up doing with this trilogy, I guess maybe in some ways by not having this big cliffhanger type ending to the second game, it allows them to kind of do whatever they want to do and they don't feel locked into a certain, certain set of, story boundaries that have been given to them. I hope that they can really figure something out, especially when next year happens and Star Wars Outlaws comes out. If that ends up being really well received for both gameplay and story wise, hopefully it kicks them in and be like, hey, the competition is making a very well received Star Wars game that has a very well received story. we got to try and figure out our story, because we have these established characters now that people have an attachment to. And we got to do something big with them, especially if this is going to be a trilogy and we're going to end it with this. So I hope that they can kind of stick the landing on the next game. I am very much looking forward to that game whenever it comes out. I'm sure it'll be 3-4 years or whatever it may be. But I like a lot of the characters that they've established in those games. Cal is fine. The main character is fine, but he has a lot of side characters surrounding him that I really enjoy and would like to spend more time with. So yeah, kind of sad news for them. Kind of the 1-2 punch of their director leaving, and then also the continued woes of the PC version. I'm sure they would kind of like to get that behind them and focus on their next project. And hey, I'm looking forward to it. All right. A little bit of Starfield news. They had their first update, and then they kind of talked about what the big features that they are going to work on. A lot of it is stuff that is definitely needed, but it is not the big things that a lot of fans are calling for, like a total overhaul of the map system and all that stuff. I assume they probably will do that, hopefully, but it is not going to be right now. So the first patch was mostly for performance and stability issues. It was a decent sized patch. I can't remember the size off the top of my head when it downloaded on my Xbox, but it was a good sized patch. But then they said that they are going to do regular updates, including top community requested features. And the ones they are starting off with are brightness controls. The fact that this game did not ship with brightness controls is insane. An HDR calibration menu, again, can't believe that it didn't have that. An FOV slider, I don't know if this is just for the PC version or if they'll put it into the Xbox version as well. NVIDIA DLSS support. So the reason why DLSS was not in, it is in if you download the mod, but it wasn't in is because they had a partnership with AMD, so it had AMD's equivalent if you have an AMD or Radeon graphics card. They're going to put in 32:9 ultra-wide monitor support. I have an ultra-wide monitor and it was fine. I must not have a 32:9. I don't know what the hell I have. Maybe 32:9 is like one of those odysseys, like the 49-inch crazy ultra-wides. And then there's going to be an eat button for food, so you're not constantly, because food is kind of pointless to pick up in the game. It recovers very, very minuscule amounts of health. So instead of having it take up a bunch of space in your inventory, it'd be nice to, I guess, just be able to hit the eat button. And then they said they're also working with NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel on driver support for stability and performance improvements on the PC. They're working on their built-in mod support that will be out next year called Creations. And they said they are supportive of the mods that are coming out and hope that they can make it easier to mod once their official mod tools come out. I have not modded my games. I don't want it to like mess up. I don't know if it would mess up my cross save with the Xbox version. Once I like totally finish the game, maybe I'll go in and mess around with some mods. But I haven't felt the need to do that. I'm fine with the game as is. In terms of like content, I still have my issues with the game, but I haven't noticed a lot of performance stuff. There are times where the game does hitch a little bit and you can tell you're under 30 frames a second over on the Xbox. But it doesn't last for too long, a few seconds at most. I mean, it's certainly noticeable and you're aware that it's happening, but it's not the worst thing in the world by any stretch. You kind of anticipate stuff like that. And not only a Bethesda game, but also just any kind of big open world game is going to have issues like that. So it's nice to see that they're kind of on top of things. They get a patch out already and more stuff to come. I imagine maybe they get another one out by the end of the month if possible. If not, maybe we get a big patch or update in October. But they don't seem like they're going to take this lightly and will be supporting this game pretty heavily. Next up, a story about The Sims. So The Sims 5, we know that they're working on. It's called Project Renee. It was announced almost a year ago at this point, I believe. But they have kind of started to talk a little bit more about the fact that it's going to be what they are calling a free-to-enter game. It's also being described as free to download, just not free to play. So there's a quote from Lindsay Pearson, VP of Franchise Creative for The Sims over at Maxis. This is her quote. We intend for Project Renee to be free to download, and that means when it's ready and fully open to our players, you'll be able to join and play and explore Project Renee without a subscription, without core gameplay, purchase, or energy mechanics. We want it to be easy for you to invite or join with a friend, and that means extending an open invitation for everyone to play. We're developing this game in a different way. We're bringing everyone along with us, and that means a lot of different phases of development, which can include everything from closed invites and small public tests to large-scale early access options. And yes, when Project Renee is ready, it'll be available to download for free. She then goes on to say that at launch, it won't be as fully featured as The Sims 4, which, God, why would they want to do that? Why would you want to make your game as fully featured as the previous game? Because that's how you sell DLC to people. You strip out features that they are used to and then sell them right back to them. So I'm curious to see the thing. I haven't played The Sims 4 in a while. I've actually played a ton of Sims 4. Sims, one of my favorite franchises of all time. I mean, when the first game came out, it was revolutionary. I was glued to it when it came out. And Sims 4, I put hundreds of hours in. But I haven't played in a while. I haven't kept up with the DLC. I would buy one of the expansions here or there if it was like specific to things that I was interested in. But the thing that she says in the in this thing is energy mechanics. I don't know what the hell that is. Is there like a weird paid thing where it's like you can pay us money and play the game for X amount of time? I'm not really sure what she means by that. I guess, well, we have the power of the internet, The Sims energy mechanics. Oh, okay. They are not existing. What she is saying is that is not a thing that will be in the game. There will not be a way to play, to start for free and then need to pay more over time to continue playing. Okay. So she's just getting ahead of what could be a potential talking point for criticism. Okay. That makes more sense. I'm curious to see what they do. They have their first competition coming out. There's a couple of other companies making life simulator games. We'll see if any of them actually get to market before The Sims 5 comes out. I imagine The Sims 5 is going to be either a 2024, maybe end of 2024, beginning of 2025, unless they do go the route of early access. I don't think EA has really done early access for the most. I can't think of an example off the top of my head. I could be just forgetting something, like really obvious, but I don't remember that really being a thing. But I just want, I don't really play The Sims to play The Sims. I play The Sims because I like the build mode. I like building houses. I like designing houses and all that stuff. Like that's kind of the draw for me. Every once in a while, I'll make like a sim and do the traditional sim type stuff. But for the most part, I really just enjoy building houses and jumping into that. I spent plenty of time browsing custom creations online and downloading new items and furniture and all that stuff to add to my game, and it's something I really enjoy. It's relaxing. It's fun to do. You pop on a movie on your other screen or what have you, and just kind of go to town building a house. And it's something I've done for a long time with The Sims. I kind of stopped. I think The Sims 3 is probably about where I ended actually playing The Sims the way, they would probably assume that most people are playing The Sims. I think The Sims 3 was really kind of where I started going over just the build mode stuff more so than anything. With The Sims 4, I really did not do much of actual simming in it. I really just kind of focused on the build mode and making that stuff. I actually, back before I did this YouTube channel and I would stream on Twitch, I actually did quite a bit of streaming of just building houses in The Sims. That's kind of what my stream was for a while. I was just kind of just doing that. And that was fun. I enjoyed doing it. I had quite a bit of, good time doing it. Christian, you have any thoughts on The Sims? It's been around forever. I assume you had to have had some type of interaction with a game that big at some point in your life, right?
That whole idea of getting people into a pool and then removing the ladder is exactly why I'm not allowed in John Hamm's house anymore.
Dude, you've got to stop admitting to crimes on this show, man. They're going to get onto you. Whatever. Actually, you know what? No, I'd be fine. Somebody can come and take you. I'm okay with that. All right. So next up, this is kind of a big story. I have tried to make heads or tails of it, but this is the stuff that's going on with Unity. So there's two news stories here. One is an update of the other. So we'll start with the original first. And both of these are coming from Video Games Chronicle. The headline is, Unity is adding a royalty fee based on the number of times a game has been installed. It's going to start January 1st of 2024. So it says the fee will apply to games made with Unity Personal and Unity Plus that have made $200,000 or more in sales in the previous 12 months and have at least 200,000 lifetime installs. It will also apply to games made with Unity Pro and Unity Enterprise that have made $1 million worth of sales in the previous 12 months and have at least 1 million installs. The fee, which will be payable monthly, will see Unity Personal and Plus developers paying a flat 20 cent per install over the threshold. Pro and Enterprise developers will pay a smaller fee that scales downward based on the numbers of installs over the threshold, and they have a table that breaks it all down. This is coming from Tom Ivan's article on VGC. Now, here's where it is. It's a flat fee, right? So it's 20% per installs. So it's 20% per install of a $60 game and 20% of installs for a $2.99 game. So the percentage wise, if you sell your game at a cheaper price, which a lot of people that use Unity do, they're small indie developers, they are losing far more of their income or profit or whatever it may be, developmental cost, than somebody that's selling a game for your traditional full price or even like $40 or something like that. And this has obviously caused a massive uproar. There are a bunch of developers. I think the biggest one that I saw was Cult of the Lamb, that they're just going to delist their game and we just won't sell our game anymore if this is going to happen. So this has been like a big talking point. A lot of people are bringing up, what about charity bundles? What if people get angry about a game and organize a mass install knowing it'll cost developers a bunch of money to do it in a hateful way? What about refunds? What about people that install demos? Installs across multiple devices. If somebody buys the same game on PC, Mac, and Steam Deck. And it's insane. They're obviously, Unity's got to be desperate for money if they are enacting this. And then the next day there was an update article here, which doesn't help much. Unity is trying to clarify new install fee and plans amid developer outcry. It says that they estimate only about 10% of Unity developers will actually end up paying any fees. It said they said initially that if a player installs a game, deletes the game, and installs it again, that would be 2 fees because they installed it twice, right? And a lot of people brought up, like I just said, what if they do that in a malicious way to try and charge the developers? Now they have walked that back and said they're only charged for initial installation. If somebody does want to install it across multiple platforms, that will count as multiple installs. For titles downloaded through subscription services like Game Pass, the fee would then be charged to Microsoft rather than a developer. I'm sure Microsoft is going to love that. Runtime fees will not be charged for installation of demos unless the demo is part of a package that includes the entire game. Qualifying charities are not going to be in charge if you're in terms of a charity thing. But yeah, I mean, yeah, here. So this article has more on the Cult of the Lamb thing. Massive Monster, the studio that made Cult of the Lamb, said, buy the game now because we're getting rid of it on January 1st. We're just going to delete it. Inner Sloth, the developer of Among Us, said this would harm not only us, but fellow game studios of all budgets and sizes. If this goes through, we delay content and features our players actually want to port our game. Our players actually want to port our game elsewhere, but many developers won't have the time or means to do the same. Yeah, there's a lot of studios that have said, well, I guess we're going to try and get our game on a different engine. That's not feasible for everybody, but there's been a lot of articles coming out on multiple different video game news websites that are calling for this to essentially be the beginning of the end for Unity. And this just might end up being, for whom the bell tolls for Unity. Unity has really been such a big name in game development because it's a very affordable, easy entryway in. And, there's a lot of people that use it. Not everybody has the the resources and means to fully harness something like the Unreal Engine or any other widely available game platform. Unity has kind of become, I wouldn't say the standard, but it's heavily adopted and heavily used within game development. So it's a real shame to see that this is kind of what it's all come to. I'm sure it's going to be a continuing story over the next week or so. And if anything else big happens with it, of course, we'll talk about it in the future. Last up this week, we're kind of ending on a down note. Sorry about that. But Ascendant Studios, the studio that just came out with Immortals of Aveum for Electronic Arts, they have laid off around 40 people at the studio, which equates to about 50% of the entire studio. It says that they've reportedly been laid off after failing to sell enough copies to satisfy its publisher. It's a shame. It was pushed pretty heavily by EA. I think the marketing behind it was fairly good. It was shown off at multiple large-scale video game press events, leading up to it. But it just didn't pack the punch. It's a really crowded year. EA doesn't have the best reputation. It's a brand new IP. I didn't get a chance to play the game. I really want to play the game, and I still do. But, in looking through the trailers, the story looked really weak. The acting looked not great. A lot of tropey type of characters, a lot of cliches, that kind of stuff. I think visually it looked very impressive, but it sounded like, even for the people that did pick it up and play through it, that it just wasn't super positive all the way around. It certainly didn't get bashed or terrible reviews or anything like that, but, you could tell that it was going to be kind of a mid-level game, and it kind of sold like a mid-level game. It wasn't, they were pushing it as a AAA big title for EA, but even though they promoted it pretty hard, I don't think they actually treated it like a AAA game. And it didn't necessarily have the polish, it seems, of a AAA title. It looked more like a B game. B games are great. B games are awesome. Some of them do really well, but unfortunately this just wasn't one of them. So hopefully these people find jobs elsewhere. We just saw this happen with Volition, where the entire studio got shut down. There's actually a news story that popped up this morning that I saw that it looked like Bethesda and Microsoft are starting to reach out to people from Volition to maybe bring them into the fold. It's kind of an interesting way to acquire a studio, wait until they go out of business and try and hire everybody. But there's a quote, again, this article from Zach Zweisen over on Kotaku, where he writes, "The latest round of layoffs is sadly not the first 2023. Since the beginning of this year, Firaxis, CD Projekt Red, Unity, Kabam Games, Ubisoft, Take-Two, Riot Games, Meta, and multiple other companies have announced rounds of layoffs. Back in March, EA itself announced that 800 people had been laid off." And then he also brings up the recent closure of Volition. So it is becoming more and more of a story where a studio comes together in a big way. They release one game, it doesn't perform well, and they just get shut down. How many studios have we seen pop up that have yet to release a game from big industry veterans like Leslie Benzies, who is with Rockstar and responsible for Red Dead and Grand Theft Auto? He's got his first game on his own coming out. What happens with that? That fails. It's like, okay, well, that studio just shut down. There were the people that left Respawn, I think it was, and they have their stuff that they're working on. It's like, are they going to be one and done? It's becoming a more frequent situation over the past few years. So it's a shame. It's not a lot of job security in the games industry. If you're super talented, hopefully that means you find somebody else, but it probably also means a lot of bouncing around. You might be working for a company for a couple of years, and then a different company for a couple of years, and then a different company, and then a different company. And by the end of your career, you get 30 years in the industry, and it's like, well, I worked on 40 different games for 40 different companies. It's like, that's a real possibility these days. But that's going to wrap up the show for this week. Let's see, what do we got going on this week? Well, tomorrow is Mortal Kombat 1. So I'm going to go out and pick up the game, and we will stream. I'm not sure what time we are going to stream, but I will always check the community page on the channel here on YouTube. That's where I always post kind of like schedule notes and all that stuff. But other than that, I think the only other thing coming out this week is Payday. I got to figure out how to work Payday. Because if I'm going to be playing it and it's an online game, I'm going to have to find a way to not only be able to hear the game and have this microphone to record, but also be able to communicate with teammates and all that stuff. And also, anytime I play an online game, I usually mute stuff because, I don't want to have people screaming racial slurs and stuff like that, and language that I would certainly not want on this channel. So we'll see how that goes. But other than that, we'll keep an eye on any indie releases that are coming out, and we'll check out anything that kind of catches our eye. It'll be probably a short or two up on the thing. I'm going to go and check my release dates real quick, just in case I'm missing anything. Nope. Yeah, Payday 3 and Mortal Kombat 1. And then next week is Phantom Liberty, which, again, I need to figure out how I'm going to do Phantom Liberty, because I never got around to getting up far enough in the PC version of Cyberpunk, so we'd have to play it on Xbox, which is fine. I have an endgame save on Xbox, so it should be fine. But we'll see. And then that kind of does it for a couple of weeks. After that, it's not until the second week of October where games kind of start coming out again. And then it's just one after another all the way through all of October. And then it really, really quiets down in November. And then that's pretty much it for the rest of the year. But yeah, that's going to wrap up the show for this week. Thanks for hanging out. Christian, before we leave, you have anything you want to add?
Well, off to another week of all the fun that comes with watching you cry yourself to sleep every night. Someday this purgatory will end, hopefully. Until then, you better get that meatloaf in the oven for Daddy.
We are not having meatloaf tonight. We're having nachos tonight. Take it easy, everybody. See you again real soon.